Hello and welcome back to Unpopular People. We believe that listening and learning from each other is key for personal development and success. Today in our interview, Dimitri Douchin. Dimitri is originally from France, but he lives in Australia, in Sydney, or sometimes also in the Blue Mountains. That's where I met him too. He's a polymath. He does so many things, and he will explain everything about this in this interview. He's into astrophysics. He has a PhD in it too. He also works with mental health. He's also sometimes an actor. There's so much to learn from him. So listen to this episode, and if you want to find out more about Unpopular People, please sign up for our newsletter at www.unpopularpeople.com. And now enjoy this very exciting interview with Dimitri. Hi, Dimitri.
Hello. Hi, Ben.
How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a internet connection problem in the beginning because you're in the Blue Mountains at the moment.
Yes, and so much rain.
So much rain,
as
yeah.
well.
There's been the floods just recently here in Australia. This will probably be released in a few weeks, but it wasn't a lot of water coming from the skies. So And with this conversation, we probably head there as well, like to the skies, and like also we will be talking about what's happening down here on Earth. But first of all, we want our listeners to get to know you a little bit. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your childhood. Where were you born, and how did you grow up?
Okay, so I was born in the suburbs of Paris. I'm 35 years old now, and had a smooth childhood. And grew up in a pretty rich and comfortable suburb in the neighborhood of Paris. And after I studied physics for quite a while, got my master's in Orsay, Paris 11 University, in fundamental physics. And then I felt a desire to explore the big spaces around the world and traveled to New Zealand, which was an incredible experience. And then decided to move to Australia to do my PhD in astrophysics. So that's when I moved to Sydney, and I'm still in Australia today. We've been in Australia for 11 years now with my fiancée, Caroline, and it's been 3 years that we live in the Blue Mountains, running away from the chaos of the big city.
Nice, yeah. But why did you go to New Zealand in the first place?
I think both for Australia and New Zealand, it was the same reason. It was the appeal to faraway landscapes, faraway cultures, indigenous cultures, and just going on to the other side of the world, literally. So I went to New Zealand for my master's internship at the University of Auckland, and got to learn about the Maori culture, which I was really fascinated about, and got to tour New Zealand for I stayed there 4 months. I toured New Zealand in a van for 1 month with my friends and girlfriend at the time. And we just had an incredible experience. Also at the time, unfortunately, my father passed away. So I had to go back to France and then went back to New Zealand to finish the trip. And that in itself was an incredible rite of passage. So to this day now, I've got a Maori tattoo on my shoulder, which is as a remembrance for my father. And it's the same thing that brought me then to Australia. I remember when I was in New Zealand, I thought to myself, there was a conference I attended, and there was this man who was talking about variable stars and studying that in Australia. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I could do that. And 1 year later, I did exactly that and started studying some form of variable stars in Australia.
Wow. Okay, and taking even a step further back, what was the reason you decided to study physics?
So when I was a child, I was told that when I was a child, I was looking up at the sky often, and I was looking at the stars. I don't remember that, but I believe it's possible. And when I was 8 years old, I said to my teacher, I want to be an astrophysicist. And he said, oh, wow, okay, that's amazing. And I said, do you know what that means? Because I was already a bit of a prick. And so then I went on and started studying physics. I was actually more of a literature person and culture person, but I was pretty bad in maths, but I persevered because I really, really wanted to fulfill the dream. And started studying maths and physics. And when I got into physics, I really, really loved it. And I was pretty good at it because it was a mix between rational thinking that you have in maths, but also a bit of tangible, practical applications, and you can reason in both ways. And that really worked well for me. So that's where I decided to specialize in physics. And because I loved astronomy and I love physics, I was like, wow, this is just a really good path. I'm going to focus on that for the next X many years, up to 28 years old, basically.
Cool, nice. And you spoke about your dad that unfortunately has passed away a few years ago, but what was his profession? Or does anything of this, what you are doing now, come from his side or from your mom's side, or does it come out of nowhere?
Right. So my dad was a teacher, a specialized teacher for children with difficulties. So he certainly taught me how to learn. And if there's one skill you want to learn, it's how to learn, because then you can learn anything you want.
True.
Yes. And he taught me a lot of patience, taught me a lot of humor as well. Just had my first stand-up comedy gig, and I believe there's a bit of his spirit in that for sure. And my mother used to work at the French television, and she was writing the subtitles. I don't know the name in English, but subtitlist, I guess. And now I'm getting back into this acting and theater and all this television kind of things, which my mom despises now that she's finished her career in it. But it's kind of funny that there's these two sides of the parents that come out in these activities. Yeah,
and your parents must be so proud of you, like all the things you've done. But
I hope so. Ask my mom. No, she's starting to be proud now. There was because I had a very scattered career and engaging in different things. There was a bit of confusion at the time, and I think for our parents' generation, it's comfortable to have a good job that pays good money and stick to that. But I didn't feel the courage or the passion to do that. So I chose to have a bit more of a snaky, sinuous way around things. And now it's starting to make sense. So now she's running with it.
Okay, cool. And so the confusion, do you know where it came from? And what brought you out of it? You said like after the snaky part.
Yes. So I studied astrophysics for quite a long time, right? I was 28 when I completed my PhD. And at the end of my PhD, I was a bit disappointed because I felt really disconnected to that childhood dream that I had. I was spending a lot of time at an office doing programming and computing and those sorts of stuff. And I was very far away from the romantic vision I had when I was a child, to look through a telescope in a really relaxing chair and taking notes with a pen and paper, which is what the event of the computer and the internet created. So I was a little bit puzzled, and then I quit academia for a little while, and it's only to start working in therapy and sexology and all this stuff. And it's only a few years after that, maybe 6 or 7 years, that I got back into astronomy, both through the stargazing tours that we run in one was the Blue Mountains, where we met, and the cultural astronomy research that I do at Western Sydney University. So it's taken me a bit of time to reconcile with astronomy and really find my place. So I think the confusion was that I headed in a direction that wasn't 100% aligned, but it was the channel of the time. It's like you had to do research, and I really had to take the time to sit down and converge and think about what is it that I want to do. You know, the astronomy matters to me. Even when I try to run away from the stars, they catch up to me, and then I find myself doing astronomy again. But it's more about what do you want to do with the stars, what do you want to do with astronomy. And by sharing my passion with the stargazing tours, and by working in the cultural astronomy and trying to uncover or recover some of the facts about Aboriginal cultures through astronomy, I'm really fulfilling all these passions at the same time. But it took a bit of time to get to that.
And also, did you have any mentors during this time? And what do you think of mentors in general, like for certain fields, especially if it's such a like an expertise like astrophysics or something like this? What do you think of mentors, and did you have one?
That's a really good question. So when I was doing a PhD, my supervisor was really helping me. Her name is Ursula De Marco. And we had really good moments and also difficult moments, but we're really good friends now. And, I graduated and everything went well. And that was the sort of the academic path that I chose. But when I went out of academia, I kind of found myself on my own. And there's something that really interested me, but I couldn't really approach, or there's some people that fascinated me, but I didn't know how to talk to them. So in the end, there's a few mentors that I succeeded in approaching or talking to, and it never come from a place of putting them on a pedestal and trying to reach their level. I think it came from a place of passion and wanting to share something. So there's this person called Yan Min who works a lot with 3D cyber art and cybersexuality, and I watched his videos on YouTube completely randomly, and I was fascinated by what he was saying. So I just wrote to him and I said, hey man, this is absolutely epic what you do. Can we catch up sometime? And he's in France. So when I went back to France, we did catch up and have coffee, and now we have really good conversations together. Just a few days ago, I bought this book that we can't see. Tyson Yunkaporta is the author, and the book is called Sand Talk. It's a really, really good book on indigeneity, and a modern and a bit of a rebel took on indigeneity. And I just wrote to Tyson on LinkedIn, and I said, hey, man, I love your book. It's blowing my mind. And then he replied and he said, that's awesome. I'm glad you like it. Let's catch up if we ever meet. So with the internet now and social media, you can approach people and just get to know people. For my 30th birthday, my fiancée Caroline made a compilation of a few of these mentors who wished me a happy birthday, including Chase Lisman, who's an erotic photographer who really influenced me when I was in my teenagehood. And there he was on camera wishing me a happy birthday. So all these things are possible, and people are maybe more approachable than we dare to believe. As long as it comes from a place of heart and passion and humility, I think we can reach out to anybody.
Nice. Yeah. And I totally agree. And that's like one of the reasons why we have unpopular people, because this makes it possible to understand that there are so many cool people out there, like including you, like the things you do. And it's so approachable nowadays. Like you can listen to someone's story. You can find out more if you contact them. And sometimes you just write to someone. And I did the same thing. Just it's funny that you say it. The last interview we recorded was with Rusty Hodge. And I've been listening to his radio station. It's called Groove Salad by Soma FM. I've been listening to it for so many years, like maybe 15, 20 years. And wow. To Groove Salad, yeah. And then now I just contacted him and he got back. So what do you think? Do you think you should tell mentors that they are your mentors, or you think you should just let it be as it is?
Coming from a European culture, I think it's more the genuinity of the connection that matters. In a more Anglo-Saxon frame, maybe you can contact people, say, "Hey, I'm looking for a mentor. Do you want to be that?" And then define the relationship and things like that. The cases when I made it happen was more organic, and in terms of mentoring, it was more a positive influence or an inspiration that they were for me, more so than the technical details of things. But there's people who mentor me and help me in every field in my life. For the business side of things, there is an incubator called the Entourage that we're a part of in Sydney that is absolutely amazing. At university, I've got amazing people who are experts in Aboriginal astronomy, Ray Norris, Bob Fuller, doing Hamaka, who are just incredible, and I just walk in their footsteps. Then when you do the hard work and you have to create something, people will join you, and some people will be less skilled than you, and some people will be more skilled, and you can just be inspired by the people above you and support the people under you.
Nice. Yeah, it's absolutely true. You also mentioned that you work in the field of mental health, especially when it comes to porn addiction and also sexuology, you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how did you end up there from astrophysics to this topic? It's very interesting.
That's right. Absolutely. So there's no logical link between the two, although there is starting to be a link now. I'll get to that. But at the beginning, the whole time when I was studying astrophysics and astronomy, etc., everything was pretty balanced in my life. But I had one big secret, which was that I was addicted to pornography, and I was also a sex addict. And this is not in your CV. This is not something that you can easily talk about. This is something that has got a lot of taboo about. And I really cared about people. I really wanted to do something around, coaching and helping people and things like that, and personal development. Because I think my whole life I felt that I was a misfit, and I tried to hack the rules of life to fit in. But ultimately, I found that you can just be yourself, provided you heal some wounds and you find alignment. And so I always wanted to do that. And after a while, I started to realize that I can talk about sexuality fairly easily without taboo. And I even made people comfortable talking about it. So I thought, maybe there's something for me there. And in this process, after quite a bit of suffering and loneliness, I overcame pornography addiction on my own, following a technique that I developed and that I now teach. And this is probably one of the accomplishments that I'm the most proud about. There's no PhD, no amount of black belts or anything that can overcome that. So yeah, it's something I'm really proud about that I can't write in my CV, although now I can. And and I feel really a strong passion for that, because the need as such, I was so lonely in that. And I feel the need is so strong that I just want to devote myself to this. And even sometimes the fiancé Caroline says, "You're doing too many things. You should put the pornography stuff on hold, focus on the stargazing." But I can't. I'm just too passionate, too driven. It's a purpose. It's something that I have to do, even if it doesn't generate income, even if I'm wasting a lot of time, even if I'm breaking taboos, being clumsy on the internet, talking about my sex life. I just can't refrain it. I have to do it. So there you go. The stars are following me, and the whole psychological aspect of sexuality that is so fascinating. I can't stop researching it.
Well, yeah, no, that makes total sense, and it's interesting that you say this, because this is, I think, a problem many people have, especially if they're driven, that they take too much on their plates. And so how do you handle it? Like, how do you handle too many tasks at once? Like, can you manage it now that you say, okay, I put this on hold, or is there like certain times for certain activities? And how do you structure your days or your weeks or your year?
Yes, there is not too much structure other than that is self-imposed. So basically, there's always a project that is more alive at a certain stage, and the other projects are more steady. Also, entrepreneurship is a key in that. If you're an entrepreneur, you can allocate your time the way you want to. You can put the projects on hold that you want or don't want. So I kind of follow where my projects are going and where the energy is, and I'm pretty lucky in that I'm not too constrained by that. Some weeks, I let some projects go for a little while, then I'll sprint on a project and I'll put it on a hold. So the week is pretty structured in that. I also work for a startup in men's health, working with men with erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, etc. So that's 2 days a week. I've got the other week at Monday, Friday for the startup. Tuesday is university, because that's where the meetings happen. And Wednesday, Thursday is for anything else that I want. And Saturday, Sunday, if I want to work, that's also available. So I kind of let the projects live by themselves and try to catch up as they go.
Mm-hmm. And I have two more questions also about those topics, because first, do you want to explain a little bit about the technique you're using for to help people with porn addiction? Do you want to speak about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm really obsessed about, I used to be obsessed with sex, and now I'm obsessed with sexuality. What I'm obsessed about is really understanding the meaning behind sexual fantasies, and more so than the meaning, to understand if there is an emotional wound that we carry, it will be portrayed in our sexual fantasies. And so if we reverse that by analyzing our sexual fantasies, we can access the emotional wounds we're suffering from. And the reason why this is interesting is because in our lives, we are limited mostly and in the first place by the emotional wounds we carried when we developed as children and young adults. And no amount of mindset and personal development can kind of overcome these wounds, which really display similar symptoms as trauma, or that can be traumas in themselves. So I think for any personal development step, the first step would be to heal these wounds, and then to look into mindset, personal development, and add the cream on top. But I feel this step of healing the wounds is really overlooked, And every human on this planet is suffering from trauma or some wounds. There's no shame in that. It's just the way it is. And by acknowledging them, we become stronger. So it is that I want to do. And pornography is this incredible, amazing repository of sexual fantasies. And so by trying to match which sexual fantasy matches which kind of wound, we can help create this bridge that can help people, everyday people, to understand their fantasies and their wounds, and people who are addicted to pornography to overcome the wound that is creating the addiction in the first place. So that's at the deep cognitive level, the method that I use. And I use trauma reprocessing. We identify the wound, then we heal the wound just like we heal another trauma. I use a technique called myesthesia, but there's a whole suite of tools that can be used for that. And at the behavioral level, at some stage, I was also wondering, like, why am I addicted to pornography? Why do I crave pornography so much? And the answer was, well, because pornography is awesome. Like, the way I create this experience with pornography will always be 100% amazing, especially now with online pornography where you've got on tap everything you want. And so I said, okay, what if I made this experience a little bit bad? What if I make it 90% bad, good, 80% good, 30% good? Ultimately, pornography will become boring and I'm going to stand from my desk and do something else. And that's exactly what I did. I looked for content that wasn't so stimulating, not so interesting, and progressively removed all the fun out of pornography and everything that was triggering those wounds inside me. And 6 months later, I stood up from my desk and I was free from pornography, which was pretty lucky and awesome.
Yeah, nice. It's it reminds me a lot about the work of Gabor Mate. We shouldn't ask the question why the drug. We should ask why the trauma. This is very interesting because it's also an addiction like anything else, like gambling or whatever. And you just not just, but you have to find a way to make it less enjoyable, to give the other things in life more meaning and those things less meaning. So yeah, nice. That's very interesting. Yeah, very good approach.
Thank you.
And also,
just to fill in, because you're talking about Gabor Mate. Also, Gabor Mate has worked a lot with ADHD and this condition and the link between trauma, et cetera, which I completely agree with. And I suffer from ADHD myself. As can be seen on my CV. But also as someone with ADHD, if you've got low levels of dopamine, then you're going to crave these high rush dopamine system like pornography and things. So there's this link between neurodiversity, addiction, and trauma that is really an awesome triangle to navigate, which is what Gabor Mate does with excellence.
For everyone that's listening and is interested in more in this topic, there are two books. One is Scattered Minds, and the other one is In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. They're both from Gabor Mate, and I highly recommend both of them to anyone interested in either addiction or also like have a closer look into ADHD. Nice. Oh, thank you so much. It's very, very interesting. Like all the things you do and like how you manage your whole day. So, how could you, if someone finds themselves in a similar situation, you already explained a bit about the technique they could use to get out of porn addiction, but you also mentioned that you're suffering from ADHD. Do you know or do you remember what helped you the most with like to get your focus back or like to get your attention span a bit longer? Do you remember, did you do exercise? Did you use medication? What did you do in the end?
So ADHD for me is a fairly recent thing. I'm self-diagnosed, and I only uncovered that maybe 6 months or a year ago. So it's a fairly fresh thing, and it started happening. It was never really a problem. I don't really have this short attention span. It's more the opposite problem where I will hyper focus on something, and then 8 hours will go by, and that'll be the end of the day. Which is not so much a big problem when you want to learn things, but sometimes you just get absorbed. And also, when you talk to people, if you're in your own mind and you hyper focus on your thoughts, then you don't hear what they're saying, things like that. So after the first lockdown hit, all right, so I've always been interested in martial arts, and I've got many years of martial arts. I've had a black belt in Taekwondo, a black belt in Ninjutsu. I'm studying MMA at the moment, trying to keep it alive. And then when lockdown hit, I couldn't do martial arts anymore. The dojo was closed, and so I didn't train. and I just put on a lot of weight and became really unhealthy. And then I realized, oh, actually, I love martial arts because it hides the pain of effort, because I have to run after people and punch them in the face, which is fun, and avoid their punches too. And then when the dojo closed, I realized, okay, I actually have zero self-care practice for my own health and body. I'm just having fun with my friends. I'm not actually training, which is not a big deal. But then when constraints like lockdowns hit, then it's a problem. So I went on to find my own self-care practice. Started studying MoveNat, natural movement, with an online coach. And I'm proud to report that as per last week, I was made a certified MoveNat trainer. I just got my certification last weekend.
Can you mention the name of the trainer you had online?
So the practice is called MoveNat. To explain it briefly, obviously it's a mix between yoga and parkour, somewhere in the middle between these two. And my coach online is called Alex Schenker. He's amazing. And the MoveNat system was developed by Erwan Lecour, who was one of the French pillars to invent parkour back some 10, 15 years ago. There's also Ido Portal, who teaches movement. All this movement kind of schools are really interesting to me.
Nice. So you also mentioned that you studied in France first, and then you did your PhD in Australia, right? Compared like the French university to the Australian university. We talked to a girl the other day. We have her on the podcast as well, Emanuela. She studied neuroscience in Canada and now studies medicine in Australia. I studied economics in Germany, or business administration, and now I want to study neuroscience over here in Australia. What are your experiences about like studying in two different places?
Yes, this is a big topic, or there's some emotions coming into this topic. The reason I was really surprised that I stopped academia after 28 years of studying the topic, and I just had to get into the work, and it would have been, an astrophysicist, like a full-time astrophysicist, and I didn't do that. And I think there was a lot of difficulties or a lot of perceptions that surprised me. The first thing is that there was actually a pretty massive cultural gap between Australia and France that I never expected. And that cultural gap expressed itself also in the world of academia and university, where publication rates are very important in Anglo-Saxon systems. Your performance, your H index, all these elements are really important. Your productivity. Whereas in Europe, I find it's a lot more laid back, and you don't have to publish so much, but the research you have to produce has to be of really good quality. So now I find that in academia, unfortunately, you have to produce so many articles per year. Even more than one article per year is really challenging already. You can't find things all the time, but there is this imperative of publishing, which I find dilutes the content, creates a lot of articles that do not have the density that and the relevance that they could have, and it's just a bit draining, really. So currently, I work in research still at Western Sydney University as an adjunct fellow. So I don't really suffer from these pressures of publishing, other than the ones I put on myself. But yeah, it's been pretty difficult to juggle all of that.
Yeah, I can imagine, and especially, how was your English back then? Like, was it were you already at the university level, or did you have to do your IELTS and study a lot English as well?
Yes, so I started learning English. So I started learning German at school, which I was okay in. But then when I was camping in holidays, and I wanted to talk to the Dutch girls who were in France, because all the Dutch people come to France in summer, and I realized I need to speak English. So I learned English from Dutch people, which actually helped me, because I was really not complex about what was coming out of my mouth, allowing myself to make mistakes. And I kept that mindset all the way till I went to New Zealand and started improving my English there. So I was really quite interested in English language in general anyway, being in France. So by the time I came to New Zealand and Australia, I had pretty proficient English already. Yes, but I did have to take the test, and, believe it or not, even this year, studying canceling, I had to take an English test, even if I've published research articles in international journals and things like that. The aberrations of the immigration system, the Australian immigration system, let's not get into that.
It's very interesting. I'm just struggling with the same thing. Not with the English test so much, but more like with all the visa like things, and especially now it's getting more and more complicated with COVID. Not after COVID, we don't have after COVID yet, but so wow, okay. But are you on your permanent residency now, or
I am not. So Caroline and I just started to start this process on the Global Talent Initiative, or GTI, Global Talent Visa, basically. But I have to prove that I am an essential skill for Australia, and that I'm an exceptional track record and all sorts of things. But when you apply for these, people expect that you have only one stream of occupation and that you're really nailing in that stream. But I have 5 streams in which I'm doing pretty good in some of these. So it's not an easy case. And this is the reason why I asked to be introduced as a polymath today. Is that I feel polymath and people who are multi-passionate, multi-potentials are not recognized in society. And it's kind of heartbreaking when you've got several skills, but people can only see one facet of you, and only this projection makes you feel really insufficient or incomplete. And so in the in the Australian immigration processes, which are already difficult to navigate, you're very limited in what you have to show and what you can show. And so we hope that we'll find a positive outcome in this, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's also another reason for us to do unpopular people, because we think it's sometimes there are people that can do so many cool things, and they're not recognized because it's a lot of marketing as well. There's so many people that think they can do nothing, but everyone knows them. Yeah, they have a big influencer group, or however you call them, followers, and all those things. And if you can do the marketing, you can, you get popular. And we want to put the focus on the people that are maybe unpopular, but they still do incredible things. And I mean, the system in Australia, for the people that are listening and don't know about it or don't know much about it, it's based on points. So you have to get a certain amount of points. If you have like a skill which is there's a so-called skill shortage list. If it's part of this list, you get more points than others. Then the English test gives you some points. Your age gives you some points, and all those things counted together will give you like a final score. And with this score, you apply. Did I say this right? Do you agree?
Yeah, that's right. And the branch I applied to is not points based. You just have to prove that you've made an excellent contribution to the life of Australians in general. Out of a PhD, there's also another pathway. Straight out of your PhD, after your PhD, normally you can get a longer visa or even a PR. But because I didn't know that at the time, and I waited 7 years after my PhD to engage in this process, then my PhD has somewhat expired or something like that. So it has no value anymore, even though it's from an Australian university. And an Australian university has paid for my scholarships and things. So yeah, some things I don't understand, but again, if I like the country enough to want to stay in it, then I have to abide by the processes. That's how I find my zen into all this.
Okay, good. And also, how do you find your zen in astrophysics? I'm very interested in this field. So you mentioned earlier, or you said earlier, I could have just worked as an astrophysicist. What does it mean? What does an astrophysicist do?
Okay, so an astrophysicist is someone who is going to study the property of astronomical objects, or someone who's going to develop a model about the universe as a whole, or about certain objects. It's someone who's going to use the universe as a laboratory to test physical hypotheses that he'd come up with. An astronomer it's pretty... I've never really understood if there's a massive difference between an astronomer and astrophysicist. People in the field will give you different responses. My understanding is that an astrophysicist is more focused on the physics of how things happened, whereas an astronomer is more focused on the actual objects, celestial objects themselves. So, for example, someone who's working on Mars and life on Mars would be more of an astronomer or an exobiologist, but someone who's testing a certain effect that can only be observed inside supernova and high energy phenomena would be more an astrophysicist. But yeah, it's pretty similar in those cases.
Some people may argue, I'm not one of them, but I just want to know from your side that we have so many things that we don't know about Earth, that we don't know about ourselves. Like how come that you want to look up into the sky and explore the universe with it, which is maybe limitless, or like what? Like why are you looking up? Why are you not looking down?
I think I started to look down when I started getting into astrophysics as a child and a teenager and a young adult. It was very much a way out. I think it was a way for me to hide from the world and do my little project on the big things, and to not have to consider too many earthly considerations, which were a bit depressing. I find at the time I was pretty hard being myself as a teenager. And then coming here to Australia, I decided that I want to fulfill my potential. I decided that I want to make a difference. And, I think I sort of bought the self-man-made model or story of the Anglo-Saxon model, and I decided to be that. And so then I was like, no, I want to do the opposite now. I want to make a difference. I want to have an impact. And I think that is what led me to leave astrophysics and academia for astrophysics in the first place. The object I was studying, I felt very detached from. It felt really far away. And with the environmental crisis we're going through at the moment, I was more about how can we use science to do something meaningful for the Earth, for this crisis, for the people around us. And ultimately, I did apply to work in engineering and green energies and things like that. But I was not successful in securing a job there, or it was not motivated enough. But that led me to cultural astronomy and how indigenous people protect the planet, work with nature, live in nature. And then I was like, oh, there's this incredible bridge here between astronomy and this way of life with nature. And talking more and more with cultural astronomers like Douchin Hamaka, with whom I did my PhD at Macquarie Uni, I realized, well, this is something I want to do. I'm now really interested in how indigenous people perceive the sky and what I can do about that and how that can help even on Earth. And that's also a reason why I'm so passionate about giving these tours at Polymath and stargazing where we met, is because, and you tell me if this was your feeling, but when people look up at the sky, some people haven't looked at the sky for years and realize that, oh my gosh, there's so many stars and galaxies and things. And also that, it's worth protecting, and it's part of nature, and we're surrounded in nature. And the lookout where we are, in the mountains is beautiful. And it's just like stopping time and kind of realizing, hey, we could have all this if we don't mess it up. So I don't contribute to the technological part of the solution, but I want to believe I contribute to the inspirational part of the solution, where people go like, oh, maybe I want to keep that as it is and not destroy it anymore.
Yeah, and as you said already, it's cultural, it's philosophical, it's spiritual, whatever you get from it. And this comes back to actually looking inside of us, because this is only our experience of the surrounding. We don't know if it would exist if we wouldn't exist. Like we only give it names and explanations and stuff. So, yeah, maybe tell the listeners a little bit more about your stargazing tour. I found it very fascinating, but they don't know about it yet.
Thank you. So a year and a half ago, Caroline and I had moved to the mountains, the Blue Mountains, and we were just enjoying nature, and we realized that we loved inviting friends over and sharing, all the bushwalks and the good things we could do. And then we were admiring the night sky as well. And then at some point, Caroline said, well, what if you bought a telescope? Could we show the stars to people? And we were like, oh, that's a good idea. So we thought about it, and then realized that the investment was pretty minimum. It was just buying a telescope, and tried put a listing out on Airbnb Experience and see if people were booking. And after, on the day when we put the listing out, people booked the tours. So we're really happy with that. And since then, the business has been growing really well. We have a lot of guests coming in. So we're running our tours every weekend at Wentworth Falls Lookout. We're called Polymath and Stargazing. And yes, the tour is an hour and a half, and we show whatever is up in the sky at the time. It starts with a wonderful sunset on the valley and near the waterfall. And then we have the constellations that appear, the stars, the planets, the galaxies, whatever is out there on the night, and just talk about the science of things, the history of things, how it's perceived with different culture, by different cultures. And it's a bit like being on stage for me as well. So I really enjoy talking to the public and being a bit silly at times as well.
Yeah, and you also have served really nice cacao.
and the hot vegan chocolate.
Yeah, hot vegan chocolate, yeah. Absolutely. Are you vegan yourself?
Keep out of the experience.
Yes. Are you vegan yourself, or why the vegan hot chocolate?
Okay, so I used to call myself vegan, but I don't think I am vegan. So some 6-7 years ago in France, we have this dish called foie gras, which you may have heard about or tried even. And the production of foie gras involves really unethical practices with the geese and how they're being fed to produce. That means fat liver foie gras. So to get that liver, you need to make the geese really sick. And that's how you get the foie gras. And I was like, and we have it for Christmas. And I was like, I don't think I want to be part of.
Sorry, you mean goose?
Sorry, yeah, goose.
Yeah. Okay.
I think geese is a plural of goose, if I'm not.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. See, like both, not like
Frenchman talking. That's right, to the German.
Frenchman to German. We should do this in German or in French. My French is not so good though. Yeah. All right. Anyways, the listeners know what we were talking about. Goose geese. Yeah.
The goose geese.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I don't want to be part of this industry of the foie gras because I think it's unethical. And then I realized, well, maybe it's the same for actually all the meat production and egg production is very unethical as well. So I became a vegetarian, came to Australia, met Caroline. She wasn't a vegetarian at the time, but she was quite curious about vegetarianism. And this one night, Caroline said, hey, there's this free projection in Sydney. It's a movie about animals. It's called Earthlings. It's going to be interesting. And I said, okay, free movie about nature. Let's go. And what we didn't know is that Earthlings is actually a documentary about all the atrocities that are happening in the meat industry and the animal industries in general with no filter. So it's all insiders cameras and hidden cameras of all the slaughters and horrible things. So for 2 hours, you just get bashed by all these atrocious images with the voice of Joaquin Phoenix on top. And this was, I guess to an extent, it was traumatizing. And it was the Sydney Vegan Club who organized this projection. And so on the day, Caroline and I and a friend who was with us, we said, fuck it, we're vegan now. Like we're not gonna support these industries. And we became vegan. And we were vegan for maybe 4 or 5 years, maybe 6 years even. And recently, my MMA teacher is also a farmer. He's got about 200 chicken who are raised in good conditions. And so I got my eggs from him. And then as time went by, we kind of relaxed these rules of veganism back into vegetarianism. So I'm feeling a little bit ambivalent about that, but it's also, I have to acknowledge that this is what I do. Also, if I had, and so I've been a vegan, or I had vegan consumption habits for a little while. But the reason why I wouldn't call myself a vegan is because if I had something that I haven't figured out yet, I would be hunting and fishing and also gathering. If I were to live the true lifestyle that I want to live, I don't know if I have the guts to take the life out of an animal, but if I had, I would be okay to hunt. So, and that's not an okay discourse with vegan people, as I've come to learn. So that's why I wouldn't call myself vegan. Probably more self-sufficient or something like that.
Yeah, and there are and there's also so many extreme ways that people go down, and I think you have to be careful with all of them. Even with veganism, some people don't live like a healthy lifestyle anymore because they just have like vegan food, and there's also, you still need like a balanced diet because Coca-Cola and fries are vegan. So it's also, when it comes to children, some people that are extreme vegan, I think there's a way to like, if you want your children to have like a vegan diet, that's I think that's totally fine, but you have to maybe supplement with B12, and there's like some things you have to be aware of, and I think sometimes it just can be dangerous. I have a plant-based diet myself, so I try to have as many plants as possible before I choose animal products, so I totally understand where you're coming from. But also, I want to know a bit more. You mentioned Caroline a few times, and also, I met her on the stargazing tour as well. So you guys seem to be such a nice match, and I'm also happy to hear that she's your fiancée. How did you meet? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about her and the relationship to her, especially after our listeners know about your past now too.
Yeah, absolutely. So Caroline, some friends of mine came to visit me in 2014. It was when I was finishing my PhD, and they came to Australia to tour Australia with me. And I said, hey guys, I can't tour Australia with you because I'm finishing my PhD, and it's a hard decision to make, but it's a good one. And at the time, one of my friends said, hey, I've got a friend who's here. Her name is Caroline. She's backpacking around Australia. Do you want to meet her? And I said, yes. At the time, I was still a little bit of a sex addict anyway. So I was like, yes, the more the merrier. Introduced me to all the ladies, but also just friendship. I was like, sure. And Caroline and I met, and we hit it pretty well. We went to Manly Beach on the second day, and I gave Caroline a surf lesson. I used to surf a little bit, but not that I'd call myself a surf teaper. But I gave Caroline a surf lesson.
You were showing off.
Yeah, I was showing off. I was showing off and making up things as I went. And at the end of that, we started to go out together after a kiss on the beach. So that's how we met. And then we kept on having a relationship. We lived in a van for 2 years. That was the test. Like we met, and then at the time I was living in a tent. This is getting into real stories, but at the time I was living in a tent next to Macquarie Uni, where I was doing my PhD. And on the night where we were talking, she said, well, where do you live? And I said, do I lie or do I tell the truth? And I thought, I'm not going to lie. I don't lie. So I said, I live in a tent in the forest. And she said, that's amazing. And I'm like, all right, she's a keeper. If she's not creeped out by a guy who lives in a tent in the forest, then she's amazing.
If you would have said, like, I also have puppies and candy there, then it would be a bit creepy.
It'd be too much.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have my driving license at the time, but we bought a van. We lived in the van, eventually got my driving license. We lived in the van for 2 years, and then lived in different places. Now living in the mountains. But at the time when we were living together, sometimes I was still consuming pornography. And I was feeling really ambivalent about that, because I have the best possible woman with me in the world. Why would I engage in these graphic scenes and things? And that's when I really made a decision to quit pornography and develop my system. So she gave me the motivation to overcome that. Yes. And then we started doing the business together, Polymath and stargazing. We also had a startup before that didn't work out. That was called Rewilding, which was meant to be an Airbnb of nature places. And we saw at the time that we could work together on a project. So now we're happy to work together on Polymath and stargazing.
Yeah, cool. And why were you living in a tent?
So I was renting a place. And as a PhD student in Australia, you don't have a lot of money to spend because you're broke all the time. In a whole year of saving money, I could buy myself a surfboard by the end of the year. That was how broke I was at the time. And I was living in this flat with my housemates, but I didn't really understand what I was doing. I was living in my room most of the time. I wasn't really using the space or the common space, the living room, et cetera, et cetera. I was getting along fine with my housemates, but I didn't really need their presence every day. So I was like, why do I live this lifestyle if it doesn't really suit me? And I also wanted to save some money. So I said, okay, I'm going to buy a tent and live in the bush. And I did that. I lived in a tent for 2 months. I actually made a YouTube series of it called Urban Jungle, which is I'm a bit ashamed of and also proud at the same time.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Thank you, please. It was really fun. And and that's how I came to do that. And with the money that I saved, I was able to afford my first ever personal development workshop, which was a Tantra workshop at the time. And that was the beginning of me finding solutions to heal from sex addiction as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, you seem like a very motivated person with so many things, and I'm also glad to hear that your fiancée Caroline motivated you to get out of your the porn addiction or sex addiction and all those things. So, what can you recommend to others that might not have the right support on their side? What can they do as a first step, getting into studying or going to another country? Because you've experienced all of it, like getting out of an addiction. What do you think is something everyone can practice in an everyday life to not go down the wrong road?
Right. I think it comes from a sense of alignment, that if you engage in something that you feel you're passionate about, or it has meaning for you, then you're doing the right thing. If it feels wrong or if you're doing it more out of fear or out of ego, more than passion or love, that's probably a red flag. Or it's an experience where it's probably going to end badly and you're going to learn something out of it, which I've also done many times, and it's fine. Some people share with me that they don't have any passion and they don't have anything to get up to in the morning. And I find it very sad, at the same time hard to believe as well. I'm convinced that everybody has something that they want to share. Maybe they don't dare to dream about it. Maybe they think they're not good enough, but I'm sure or they don't think it's possible. But I'm sure those things that you were doing as a child for fun. Was it drawing? Was it playing with animals? Was it walking in the bush? If you had pleasure in that, there is a truth about you in that you can bring outside of you and put into the world to help the people around you to, a small or big scale. So I think it's more about how can I help the people around me? How can I do something that's meaningful for me and that feels aligned? Now, as much as I say that, I want to say that everything in my life that's happened now has been planned and designed to land where I'm at. And not at all. It was just a convergence of a million decisions at a time that led to now a fairly good alignment. But yeah, I think saying yes to things, not being afraid of the consequences, trusting that we can recover from anything. I've recovered from addiction. I've recovered from depression. I've recovered from losing my father. My twin sister tried to end her life. And you can recover from all these things with trauma recovery, with healing, with support. So many things available to us if we decide that we want to live 100%.
I just a few days ago, I was with one of my clients that I do exercise with, and he's also becoming a friend. He's 17 years old and he has ADHD, but a very, very smart and switched on person. If you hear this now, hello from, you know who I'm talking about. I was practicing with him a bit like social behavior, like how to act in certain situations. And it's what you said just aligns very good with what he said to me. I asked him, how would you react if my partner Elisa, if she would leave me and I would tell you like, oh, my partner just left me and I'm really sad. And he was thinking about it for a moment, and then he answered, well, you were also you were still going the same path and you're still going in the same direction. And only because she's not in your life anymore, you are still you. And I found that this was very nice. And what you just said was very aligned with this as well. You had so many things in your life, so many setbacks with your father and also your twin sister. What you just mentioned, those are really sad, and I'm very glad to see that you're doing so well. And I think this is good motivation for other people as well, if they don't have a great support network. So yeah, I think they find someone like you around, and hopefully they listen to this and find some motivation about this too. So thank you for that. And
thank you, Ben.
Yeah, I also want to know some more things that we always ask our listeners. What would you do if you were popular? If you known over the whole world and you would fill the stadiums, and would you do anything differently than now?
I tend to be popular. I intend to fill stadiums. I'm converging. I want to converge on something that is a mix of comedy, personal development, and coaching, and culture, knowledge sharing, something like that. I really want to do something like that. So when I fill stadiums, I want to be maybe a bit less arrogant. I think at times I judge myself a bit. things are a bit too slow. I want things to move faster. And maybe I can be perceived as a little arrogant or a little bit egocentric. So I want, I think if I feel stadiums, I'll be very much like that the first few times. And then once I've found validation from other people, but mostly so within myself, I think I'll be more chillax and relax. But I'm hoping if I'm popular, I can use this popularity for some form of activism or inspiring people into living their best possible life.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. And also, I don't know if you guys want to have kids one day, but I don't want to ask this question because we get asked those questions so many times and it can be sometimes really annoying. But like instead of asking the question, if you want, like, what would you teach your kids? What do you think our school systems are missing in the world? What do you think should be implemented all around the world in the school? So if we could start in Australia or France, doesn't matter, but what is important for like young kids to learn?
During the MoveNat certification process, I had to coach my fellow students in MoveNat, and I had to teach how to lift a heavy object, how to do a deadlift, or just how to lift a heavy ball. And I was like, isn't it crazy that you don't get taught at school how to lift a heavy object without breaking your back or without breaking your knees? Isn't it crazy that you're not taught at school how to manage your emotions? I think especially in Europe, there's a lot of emphasis on filling the mind with knowledge. But now with the development of the internet, we don't really need that anymore. So it's interesting to see what school is going to become. But even though I haven't experienced Montessori schools, I think project-led schools are really, really meaningful. I hope our children will build businesses and will create structures and associations and gather people around the things that make them feel alive. So I think it's more a sense of finding who they are. If schools could help people finding who they are rather than fit them into a mold, the best possible mold, but it will never be the right shape, and how to live out of authorship and integrity rather than the best possible thing that society expected them to do, that would be, our society would be uniquely and tremendously different.
Thank you so much. I also, I asked now like the questions we ask every time, but I also have a few geek questions about physics, astrophysics or astronomy. And maybe a bit more for our listeners that might get confronted with this topic for the first time. Let's start with something simple. What's the difference between an asteroid and a meteoroid, and what else is there?
Yes. Okay, so a meteor is a pebble, a rock flying through space. And that rock may be captured by the Earth's gravity, and if it does, it's going to fly through the Earth's atmosphere. And as it does, it's going to burn and crash, and potentially burn entirely or crash on the surface of the Earth. As it's burning and it's passing really quickly through the atmosphere, what you see is a shooting star. So a shooting star is not a star. It's actually a meteor that's burning with the friction in the atmosphere. And if there's a residue on Earth that you find, then that residue is called a meteorite. So that's from the meteor back to the meteorite. Then there's a comet. A comet it kind of looks like a shooting star, but a shooting star passes by in 1 second. A comet will fly over several weeks above your head. So comets are pieces of rocks and ice that come from far away in the solar system, this region called the Kuiper Belt, which contains some of the primordial material of the early solar system. And every so often, these comets will pass around the sun. And as they do, the ice that they're made of is going to melt. And this is why you observe the comet, which is the blob at the center. And then you've got a tail, actually 2 tails, at the back, is because the ice is melting and it's traveling really fast. So that's for the comet. The asteroids are meteors, so space rocks, that are traveling nearly exclusively between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. So the order of the planets is Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter. So there shouldn't be any asteroid that passes in our region if it stays in the asteroid belt, but sometimes 2 asteroids knock off each other, or they could be deviated gravitationally by something, so then they can fly in our area. but not all the pebbles that we receive on Earth and the shooting stars are from asteroids. They could be from any other place as well.
Thank you very much. I wanted to know what does cultural astronomy means, and how did you get into this?
Okay, so cultural astronomy is a fairly new field, or it's a field that's getting more popularity. And cultural astronomy deals with how different cultures around the world perceive the sky and what that tells us about the sky, but even more so about who we are as people on this earth looking at the sky. So it involves sometimes archaeology and looking at the alignment of ancient monuments like Stonehenge. It can involve ethnography and anthropology, hearing the stories that people have about the sky and how that informs the science that they had about the sky as well at the time. It can involve history and looking into ancient civilizations. If you look into Maya astronomy, for example, or any civilization that would have not survived, even though there's still Maya people around this world. So it's really a congruence of different sciences that rotate around the aspect of astronomy and how people perceive the sky back in the days or in different cultures, and how does that put in perspective our vision of the Earth and the sky today. And how I got into this was with Douchin Hamaka, who's one of the most reputed figures in cultural astronomy in the world as of today. And I just received his book today, by the way, called The First Astronomers, How Indigenous Elders Read the Stars. And I just can't wait to read it. And we were doing our PhDs together at Macquarie University. And one day I met Douchin and he gave me a lift. And I said, "How was your day?" And he said, "It was pretty good. I went to explore some ancient rock art in the forest. And then I went to talk to some elders about their knowledge. And I'm about to write an article." And that I was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And then unconsciously, I didn't do anything about this knowledge, or consciously didn't do anything about this knowledge or this realization for a while, until I decided that, hey, this cultural astronomy stuff is really cool. So I worked with Douchin and Bob Fuller and other astronomers that I mentioned earlier for 4 years as a volunteer. And at this time, there was an opportunity that opened at Western Sydney University, where I was able to join one of these teams. So at the moment, I'm privileged to be working with the direct people in the Blue Mountains and understanding how to recover some of the knowledge that would have been lost, or just clarifying some of the functioning of the direct culture in astronomy. And so I started doing this work in cultural astronomy when I moved to the Blue Mountains. And I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do about this cultural astronomy stuff? And I said, well, what about the Blue Mountains? What do we know about the astronomical lore of the Blue Mountains? And turns out there is not a whole lot out there that is well known. So I started to look around and explore the Blue Mountains and spend a lot of weekends, you can ask Caroline, spend a lot of weekends out in the bush looking for engravings and artifacts and connections. And ultimately, after about exploring 150 places, came to the site that's got, this is a bit culturally sensitive, so I can't reveal too much, but it's got a rock cairn that is aligned with the summer and the winter solstice. And I shared this discovery with an Aboriginal elder, and she said that this was a major discovery. So I'm really looking forward to maybe understanding a bit more how the site can work, what it means, how the stars can be read with this site, what it means for the direct people and Indigenous cultures in Australia, and see what comes out of that. But what a privilege to come as a Frenchman into this very tense climate in Australia between settlers and Aboriginal people, also in an effort of reconciliation, and be able to help recover some of the damage that's been created during the colonization. So I feel really humbled and privileged to be able to do this work. And as when I was with that Aboriginal elder on that site, we came together on the day of the summer solstice. And I said, if what I think is right, the sun is going to cast its shadow in this direction, and this is going to appear. And it's exactly what happened. And when it happened, I just cried. And I thanked the elder with whom I was, because this was such an incredible spectacle to witness the science that could be hundreds, thousands years old and to be witnessing that firsthand, and in community with the communities, so in partnership with the communities. So that's a long intro to cultural astronomy.
Cool.
I think that's about it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, perfect. It's very I think it's very important for people to just get a brief idea about things, and sometimes it can, your interest will be piqued from those things. So So one more question: what are stars?
Okay, so stars. So when the universe was made, originally it was mostly made out of hydrogen, which is a proton and an electron, just spinning around each other. So hydrogen is the lightest atom and the simplest atom in the periodic table. And there's a few phenomena that happened that led to, that I won't get into, that led to the universe as it is today. But basically, then sometimes you've got a big patch of hydrogen in the sky, and that patch or that cloud is going to start to collapse under its own weight. And as it does, all the hydrogen is going to come together, and it's going to create a lot of friction between the particles, an increase in pressure, and so an increase in temperature. And when the temperature reaches 1 million degrees inside that cloud is when the hydrogen is going to start fusing into helium. That's a nuclear reaction, and that nuclear reaction produces energy. So the reason why stars shine is because they're basically a nuclear reactor, and they're constantly transforming hydrogen into helium and producing energy through heat and through light at the same time from this reaction. And then all the elements will be formed. The helium will turn into carbon, carbon into nitrogen, nitrogen into oxygen, etc., etc. So this is how the elements have been created. It's inside the stars that are these gigantic nuclear reactors in the sky.
Cool. And from the point of view of cultural astronomy and from your point of view, are we alone in the universe?
Right. So my opinion on this question is not much more informed than the science that exists already. There is a paradox called the Fermi paradox, which is the fact that there is a high probability that life could be around us. If you estimate the number of worlds around us that exist, it would be a 1 followed by 25 zeros. So that's a pretty big number of worlds around us. And yet we haven't discovered any life around us as far as we can say. So how is it possible that statistically life should have developed, but it hasn't existed so far? Is it that we are the first ever technological species and we're the first one? Is it that we're actually alone? Is it that there were other civilizations, but they collapsed, just like ours is about to? Was it that there's people everywhere, but we just don't perceive them because they're in the folded dimension, or they're in some radiation we cannot perceive, or anything like that? So that's pretty much where science is at, and my opinion is not more informed than that.
Okay, yeah, thanks. But you mentioned the Fermi paradox, and I was very happy to hear that too. So, yeah, thank you so much. I would have like 1,000 more geek questions, but I think we should also leave this to you, the expert in this field. So if people are interested, where can they find out more about you? Is there any way to contact you, or are you like publicly available somewhere?
Okay, so if you'd like to join our stargazing tours, you can head to bluemountainsstargazing.com and you'll find our tours. If you'd like to have a bit of a structure around pornography addiction and sex addiction, I'm about to launch a new platform and community called Unhooked. So the website is unhooked.care. You're most welcome to go there and see if you like the space. And if you just want to have a chat or just anything in particular you want to discuss, you can just talk to me on Facebook. I'm Dimitri Douchin on Facebook. And I just joined the Instagram. And my handle is Life of a Polymath. It's mostly photos of Caroline on there, but you're most welcome to talk to me there if you want to as well.
Nice. Thank you very much. And also, I was saying earlier, some people argue, why do you look up and not down? The thing is, we always look up, and it's us that look up. And so we always, at the same time we look up, we also look down, because we're exploring the sky, and it comes out of our eyes, our consciousness, our minds. And so thank you for looking up for us and explaining those things that are happening around us, give it everything a bit more meaning and sense, and especially for people that are struggling to find meaning in their life. I think this is something very valuable. This interview was amazing for me. I'm very grateful for your time. I wish, I really hope for that we stay in touch and we have some more conversations. We'll definitely say hello and have another stargazing tour when you come down to the Blue Mountains another time. So I said enough. I say thank you from my side. And if there are any final words, please let the listeners know now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. This has been really a fun conversation to be had. Just to wrap up on what you said, in every indigenous culture around the world, we hear as above, so below. By looking up, we reflect on our condition down here onto Earth. And you mentioned meaning. I think, if anything, in the 21st century, we really suffer from a crisis in meaning. And there's so many possibilities that some people feel lost because they cannot find a sense of what they want to do. So I would invite them to sit down and find what makes them feel alive, and then to share this passion with the people around them. And that's how they will find alignments and influence if they want to.
Thank you and goodbye.